The light in the studio is soft, subdued, the kind that evening shows love. At the host's table is Keanu Reeves. Smiling, modest, the way the whole world knows him, the interview progresses smoothly, jokes, stories from the filming, the audience laughs, the camera occasionally catches his serious but kind eyes, everything goes as usual, until suddenly, somewhere in the middle of the interview, he stops answering. He just stops. At first, the host thinks that Keanu is thinking or joking, but something changes. Something deeper appears in his gaze. Keanu begins slowly, almost in a whisper, "Can I say something that wasn't in the script?" The audience falls silent. The host nods, smiling in surprise. "It's not about the movie," Keanu adds. "It's personal. Very personal." He leans forward a little. His voice remains calm, but something inside him cracks. "The camera captures every emotion. There are things that stay with us forever," he says. "Even if they seem insignificant, then." A pause. A few people in the audience exchange glances. "I didn't plan on saying this on air," he continues. "But sometimes, it's worse to be silent." And that's it. He's silent. He doesn't finish his thought. He doesn't explain. He just sits, staring off into the distance. Like someone who has just discovered something very old inside him. The cameras are still rolling, the host is no longer smiling. He's curious, too, what exactly did Keanu Reeves want to say and why didn't he say it? There were still more than 15 minutes left on the air. But it seemed as if time had stopped. Keanu was silent, not embarrassed. Not confused. And with that silence that only memories carry with them that have not been allowed to breathe for a long time. He looked somewhere past the studio, as if he saw something else behind the spotlights, something completely different from the world of interviews. The host carefully leaned forward. "Do you want to say something?" Keanu did not answer immediately. His gaze slowly returned to the audience. The camera sensed the change. The director, not having time to give instructions, simply left the frame static. "Sometimes," he said finally, "you live for years, thinking that you simply forgot something. Nothing terrible. But then suddenly you realize you did not forget. You ignored it." These words hung in the air like dust in the beam of a spotlight. "Did I ask this? Something personal?" The host asked quietly. Keanu nodded. "That in 2009. I was coming back late from the venue. It was about 4 in the morning. Gray, empty. And then I stopped at a kiosk. I wanted to buy coffee, but there was no seller. And there was a guy standing next to me. It seemed to me that he recognized me, but he didn't come up. He just stared. And there was something in his eyes that made me decide, it's better not to start a conversation. I was exhausted. Closed. I walked past." The camera slowly moved closer to his face. There was no theater there. Only confused simplicity. "That I saw that guy only once. Never again. But his face," he took a breath of air, "never left me." The host didn't interrupt. He didn't ask for clarification. He just listened, like the rest of the audience. "And a few weeks ago I got a letter. Anonymous. It said a few words. He was waiting. He knew you would remember. We forgive." The silence in the studio was as thick as glass. The audience didn't move. "That I don't know who sent it. I don't know where the letter came from. But I haven't been able to sleep properly since. That moment when I decided that silence was neutral, now it seems like a choice. And I chose the wrong one. Keanu looked up and said directly into the camera, "If anyone knows the guy who stood at the kiosk on 3rd Avenue in Los Angeles that night in October 2009, tell him, I remember, and tell him. I don't just owe him a word, tell him, I owe him my presence." For a second, it seemed like the cameras had stopped rolling. But that was just the weight of the moment, and then quietly, without a prompt from the director, the camera panned to a girl in the 3rd row. She was sitting, clutching something in her hand, a rolled-up piece of paper. Her lips moved slightly. But the microphones didn't pick up the sound. The director gave a close-up, the girl's eyes sparkled, and she whispered first to herself, and then a little louder, "He was my brother." The words lingered in the silence like a second breath, "He was my brother." They didn't explode like a line in a movie, they arrived like truth, quiet, trembling, undeniable. Every camera in the studio now trained on her. Her hands trembled as they clutched a small, crumpled piece of paper, the corners worn thin, like it had been opened and refolded too many times. Keanu didn't react with celebrity polish or emotional theatrics. That he simply turned his body fully, directly toward her. The host sat frozen, unsure whether to step in or step back. But Keanu had already risen from his chair. The set light seemed to dim around him as he took a slow, steady step toward the audience seating. Security in the back moved reflexively, but the floor manager motioned them down. This wasn't panic. This was presence. The young woman, mid-20s maybe, hair tied back, no makeup, eyes red not from the moment but from days, possibly years, stood on trembling legs as Keanu approached the edge of the seating area. That he didn't speak at first, that he didn't have to. Their eyes locked, and in that brief moment, all the years between 2009 and now collapsed into a single breath. Then she took one small step forward. "I almost didn't come today," she whispered. Her voice was soft, hoarse. I've watched every interview of yours. I didn't want to hate you. But I did. For a long time." She unfolded the paper. The audience couldn't see it, but Keanu could barely. It was a photograph, faded. Two boys standing near a chain-link fence, one of them smiling at the camera, wearing an oversized hoodie with a tear in the sleeve. The one not smiling, the one with his eyes half closed, not out of drowsiness but something deeper, was the one she stared at. "That's Troy," she said. Keanu nodded. His lips moved, but the words didn't come. She looked down. "He told me about the night he saw you. He said he almost didn't speak. Said it was stupid. Said you were tired, and that he was just noise." Tears now welled, not in the dramatic way of television moments, but in the heavy, helpless way of someone remembering things that won't ever be fixed. But for some reason, he held on to that moment. "Like you mattered more than he did." Keanu stepped closer, until only the short studio railing separated them. "I was wrong that night," he said. "I didn't know how much something small could cost someone else. I didn't see him, but I should have." She folded the paper again, more gently this time. "He kept this photo with him everywhere. He wrote your name on the back, with the date. Said maybe someday he'd hand it to you properly. But," her voice cracked, "but he never got to." Keanu's hands curled slightly at his sides. For a moment, he looked younger than anyone had seen him in years. The weight of the moment aged his silence, softened his posture. "I'm here now," he said finally. "Too late." He nodded, yes. But not absent. The audience didn't move. No one clapped. No one whispered. This wasn't a moment for applause. It was too human. Too unfinished. Then she said something unexpected. "He left something else." She pulled out a smaller paper, folded so tightly it looked like a square of fabric. "He wrote you a letter." Never mailed it. Said he didn't want to send it to someone who wouldn't answer. She held it out. Keanu hesitated, not from fear, but reverence. He took the note like it was glass. There were only a few words, written in tight, crooked handwriting, that if you ever remember me, I won't need an apology. Just proof that people like you still feel. After the show, the network offered to cut the moment from the broadcast. Keanu refused. That he gave no additional comment to the press. The only thing he released was a short statement. We don't always know the weight of what we leave behind, but when it finds us, the least we can do is carry it with both hands. A week later, a quiet donation arrived at a small youth outreach center in East LA, enough to run 10 years of therapy programs. The donation was listed under one name, Troy. The envelope stayed unopened for 2 days. Keanu kept it in his jacket pocket, close to his heart. Not because he was afraid of what was written inside. He wasn't. He had already read the note Troy's sister had handed him on the air, the one that shattered him more than any performance ever could, but this second envelope, marked in the same trembling handwriting, was different. That it had weight, not physical, but emotional, the kind that asked for silence, not a stage. So he waited. And when he finally opened it, he did so not in a hotel room or on a plane, but in the early morning, sitting on a worn park bench in East LA, a place he hadn't visited since his earliest acting days. That he unfolded the paper. It was stained slightly in the corner, maybe from water, maybe from tears. And the handwriting wasn't steady. It shook. The words leaned slightly left. Dear K. You probably don't remember me. That's okay. That I saw you once. You were tired. I think that's what made me try. You looked how I felt. That I asked you for something that night, and you didn't give it. But I think maybe it was the wrong time. Maybe people don't give when they're empty, too, but I just wanted to tell you it was enough that you stopped. Even for a second. That I've been trying to believe people feel. That they care. That they see what's not obvious. You're the last one I ever hoped might prove that. So if you ever remember me, if that second comes back to you someday, don't apologize. Just feel. Really feel. And if you ever do that, I'll know I wasn't wrong about you. T. B. Keanu sat there for a long time after. Birds chirped somewhere to his left, a dog barked across the street, and traffic hummed distantly, like the world refusing to stop for anyone's grief. But inside him, something shifted, not a collapse. A cracking opened. That he folded the letter gently, like it was fragile, and stood. Later that week, he asked his assistant Lila to help him find the outreach center Troy's sister had mentioned during a quiet moment after the show. That it wasn't on any map. It didn't have a website or a donation page. That it was run out of an old gym, 1 street away from where Troy had been seen most nights in his final year. When Keanu arrived, he didn't bring cameras. That he didn't wear sunglasses. That he didn't introduce himself. That he brought lunch, and when a boy with a bandaged hand tried to sneak out the back, he followed him. Sat beside him on the curb and just existed there. Not with answers. Just presence. The staff let him. They knew who he was, of course. But no one said his name out loud. It was like they understood instinctively this wasn't a visit. It was a return. That afternoon, he asked to see the room Troy used to sleep in, the back corner of the gym, where a cot and 2 lockers remained. The space had been cleaned out, but something lingered. Not sadness. Not even regret, memory. Keanu sat on the edge of the cot. That he pulled out the letter again. Read it once more, and then, slowly, he placed it in one of the lockers. Not left behind. Left forward, like Troy was still part of the walls, the echo, the silence between boys with bandaged hands and uncertain eyes. That night, Keanu met with Troy's sister again. Not on camera. Not in public, they sat in a diner just off the highway. 2 mugs of tea between them, untouched that he didn't speak right away. Neither did she. Finally, she asked, "Why does this matter so much to you now?" Keanu looked out the window, watching a neon sign flicker across the windshield of a parked car. "Because I built a life out of moments that mattered to other people," he said, "but I ignored one that mattered more than I realized. And now that I've seen it, I don't want it to be the one I'm remembered for." She nodded. "He wasn't angry at you, you know," she whispered. "He was just hoping you'd be who he thought you were." Keanu looked down at his hands. "I'm trying to be." 2 weeks later, without announcement, the old gym reopened under a new name, the Troy Barron Center for Listening and Youth Support. No plaque said, "Founded by Keanu Reeves." No photos on the wall, but in the corner of the main room, on a music stand, rested a framed letter. The real one stayed locked away. This was a printed copy that it read only 4 words, "Just feel. Really feel." And for the first time in years, Keanu Reeves felt not famous, not forgiven but present. The Troy Barron Center didn't make headlines. No press releases. No ribbon-cutting. No photos of celebrities smiling next to local officials. It simply opened one Monday morning, and the doors stayed open. On the surface, it looked like any modest neighborhood youth program: second-hand books, mismatched chairs, a shelf of cracked board games, and a whiteboard with scrawled reminders for free tutoring and weekend meal drives. But something else lingered in the air, not grandeur, not grief, something closer to attention, a sense that this place didn't exist to fix people, but to notice them. It was subtle at first. A teenager who started showing up not to play, but just to sit. A quiet girl who returned a second time just to reread a single quote pinned to the bulletin board. A boy who brought a broken ukulele and started plucking aimless notes in the corner every day after school, and on the wall above that ukulele the letter, not labeled, "Inspiration," or "Donor Spotlight." Just framed. Just present, just feel. Really feel. Some read it and moved on, others read it, stared, and never asked who wrote it, as if the words knew who they were meant for. One afternoon, a young volunteer named Mateo sat with Keanu outside on the back steps. Mateo had been quiet for weeks, but something had shifted in him. You could tell in the way he sat still now, without nervously bouncing his knee. "I used to think people like you didn't mess up," he said suddenly. Keanu didn't laugh. "I do," he said simply. "A lot." Mateo nodded. He looked at the clouds for a moment before asking, "That letter in there, that's about someone, right?" Keanu paused. Then answered, "No. It's for someone. But now it belongs to everyone." Mateo didn't press. He didn't have to. He had lost his own brother 2 years before, a brother who, according to him, just faded out. Not in a dramatic way. Just, quietly disappeared into silence, like Troy had. Now Mateo came to the center every Tuesday and Thursday. He didn't call it volunteering. He said, "I just don't want anyone else to fade." One night, long after everyone had gone, Keanu sat alone in the back of the center, flipping through a battered notebook they kept by the entrance. Visitors were encouraged to write thoughts, draw, or leave lyrics. There were poems from 8-year-olds, sketches of hands, lines from rap songs scribbled with purpose, but on page 72, written in precise handwriting, was a short entry: "I don't know who he was. But someone felt him enough to build this. And that means maybe someone could feel me too." Keanu closed the book gently, and for the first time since that day in the interview chair, he felt something rising in his chest: not regret. Not even grief. It was connection. That he started staying longer each week. Not to lead. Not to teach. Just to be around. Some days he washed dishes after the evening meal. Some evenings he helped fix squeaky doors. He told no one what to call him. Some just said, Mr. K. Others, the tall guy. It didn't matter, what mattered was that he kept showing up. One Sunday morning, he arrived early and saw someone already sitting on the front steps. Troy's sister, she hadn't visited the center since the week of the opening. But now she was there, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the sky shift color. Keanu sat beside her without speaking. After a long pause, she said, I almost didn't want this place to exist. Felt like it made him into a symbol. He nodded slowly. That was never the point. I know, she whispered. But watching it work, watching them walk in with empty eyes and walk out a little more filled, she shook her head. It's surreal. And beautiful. And it hurts. Keanu looked out over the quiet street. It hurts because it matters. She turned to him, voice a notch softer. Do you think he knows? Keanu considered this not like a man reaching for some comforting idea, but like someone searching for something he wanted to believe was real. Then he answered, if there's anything that lingers, anything we leave behind. I think he's in all of it. That same day, something new appeared on the wall near the door. A frame smaller than the letter with a quote handwritten in pen on lined paper. Sometimes, the people who feel invisible are just waiting for someone to say, I see you. Baron. No one knew who put it there. Keanu didn't, but he didn't need to, because the center was no longer about him, or even Troy alone. It was about everyone who walked through the door believing they were too late to be heard. It was a place for second chances that didn't look like redemption stories. They looked like conversation, like someone staying 10 minutes longer, like a voice asking, you okay? Like a man who once didn't say a word, finally listening. It was almost a year to the day since the confession. The studio had long since aired it, archived it, and moved on to the next viral moment. The public had talked, admired, debated, then forgotten, as they always do, but not everyone had moved on, not everyone could. The Troy Barron Center had grown without headlines. New kids arrived weekly. Some stayed for a day. Some stayed for good. A former gang member now ran the tutoring room. A girl with social anxiety hosted poetry nights. A volunteer who once barely spoke now managed the community fridge with a handwritten sign taped to it, because even quiet hunger deserves to be heard. The place breathed like something alive. And Keanu? He was still there, not every day, but often. No cameras. No questions. That he planted herbs. Fixed a leaky faucet. Sat in the back row during youth open mic nights. Sometimes he spoke. More often he didn't. But the kids had stopped treating him like someone famous. To them, he was the man who showed up. One overcast morning, just as rain began to flirt with the pavement, a car parked slowly across the street. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't flashy. A man stepped out, tall, lean, dressed in a navy windbreaker and worn jeans. His eyes moved with intent, but his steps were unsure. He held a manila envelope to his chest like it might dissolve if he breathed too hard. Inside the center, Keanu was sweeping near the side door when he noticed the figure standing under the porch awning, not knocking, just watching. He opened the door. Can I help you? The man looked up, startled. His voice, when it came, was deep and quiet. Didn't come here for you. Keanu nodded once. You wouldn't be the first. I came for Troy, he added. That name, spoken so plainly, still landed like a stone. Keanu stepped aside and let the man in. They sat in the empty common room, quiet except for the ticking clock above the fridge. The man kept the envelope pressed to his thigh. He didn't speak right away. Keanu waited. Finally, he said, "I was his father." The words hit like thunder without sound. Keanu remained still, unsure whether to reach for the envelope or simply listen. "I left when he was 7, the man said. I wasn't. I wasn't fit. I was angry. Scared. I don't know. His mom tried hard. But I stayed gone. Thought I'd done him a favor. He looked around the room. When he died, I didn't come. Didn't even know right away. I found out through someone who saw your interview." He shook his head slowly. "Didn't think it was real. But I watched it. And then I watched it again. A long pause. Third time I watched it, I cried." Keanu's voice was barely audible. "What made you cry?" The man blinked fast, rubbed his hand over his face. "You said I didn't see him. But I should have." He looked up now, straight at Keanu. "I didn't see him either." Keanu exhaled, long and slow. Then asked, "Why now?" The man held up the envelope. "I wrote him something. Years ago. But I never sent it. Didn't even remember I had it till last month. When I found it, I didn't know what to do with it. Can't give it to him. Thought maybe this place would know." Keanu reached forward. "May I?" The man hesitated. Then let go. Keanu opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single page. Yellowed slightly, the ink faded but readable. "To my son, I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to say this out loud, but if I am, I want you to know I regret walking away from the best part of me. That I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I hope someday you'll believe I tried to become a man worth remembering. Dad." Keanu folded the letter with care, then stood, and without a word, he walked to the small display case near the bulletin board, the one with Troy's name, his photo, and a copy of his letter. He opened the case, placed the new letter beside the old, and closed it again. Now, two voices lived there. One from a son who asked to be remembered, and one from a father who begged not to be erased. That evening, Keanu sat alone on the front step of the center. The sky was smoky pink. The wind carried the sound of a child laughing 3 streets over. He took out his phone, not to scroll, not to call, just to look at the last photo someone had taken of him and Troy's sister, weeks earlier. They weren't posing. They weren't smiling, they were planting a tree. She held the sapling, he held the soil. Neither looked at the camera. And that's what made the photo so real. As he stared at the screen, the porch door creaked open behind him. A familiar voice spoke. It was Mateo, the teen who once said he just didn't want anyone to fade. "You staying late again?" he asked. Keanu looked up. "Guess I am." Mateo sat beside him. After a few minutes, he said, "You ever wonder what this place would have been like if Troy had seen it?" Keanu nodded. "I think about that every day." Mateo glanced at him, then smiled, not wide, just enough. "I think he'd feel it." Keanu didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "So do I." They sat in silence, not the kind that needs to be filled, the kind that means something.